Alright, hi everyone. My name is Madison Browning. I hope you all had a great Thanksgiving break and are looking forward to the final week or so of term. I'm going to talk about emergency services communication in mass casualty incidents, or MCIs, which I'll refer to them throughout my presentation for. So, mass casualty incidents can occur at any time, whether it's a natural disaster or mass shooting or multi-car pileup on the freeway. We as emergency medical responders need to be prepared to handle all of these situations. A mass casualty incident is defined by EMS World as any incident where the number or severity of patients overwhelm immediately available resources. This doesn't mean you have one ambulance there and they're overwhelmed. It means that you have 5 ambulances and all of them are still overwhelmed and your agency has no more resources left. That would be considered a mass casualty incident. This can be anything from an overturned school bus to something on the scale of the Las Vegas shooting. Both present very different safety considerations and mechanisms of injury. Every mass casualty incident is going to have different levels of safety precautions and mechanisms of injury that you're going to need to take into account. Mass casualty incidents can be categorized into natural disasters, transportation system emergencies, industrial incidents, outbreaks, and terrorism-related incidents. So natural disasters can be anything along the lines of earthquakes, hurricanes, what's happened in Houston and Florida and Puerto Rico, and any other related natural emergencies that are caused by the environment. Transportation system emergencies are something like train derailments or multi-car or motor vehicle pileups where you have, 5, 6, 7, 8 vehicles that all have critical patients involved. Outbreaks are caused by pathogens that infect large numbers of people. We haven't had one of those in a while, but they are still considered mass casualty incidents at times. Terrorism-related incidents are unfortunately rather well known. This can include the detonation of an improvised explosive device in a large crowd of people, like the Boston Marathon, or shooting large numbers of people with some sort of semi-automated or automatic weapon, like Las Vegas. So, whatever the mass casualty incident is, communication is paramount in all of these situations, in part due to the large number of professionals that are involved in responding to these events. EMTs and paramedics, which are most likely what we're going to be doing, are often the first to arrive on these scenes, and they're vital in triaging patients. Fire departments and law enforcement are also some of the first on scene. Hospitals also are important to this type of emergency response. They receive patients from the field and provide advanced treatment such as surgery and long-term care. Depending on the MCI, other specialized entities such as military personnel, advanced rescue crews, or even hazmat teams may be on the scene. Press and media are also always going to be on or near the scene, and we as EMS responders might run into them, and we need to be able to communicate with them. And as always, we communicate with our patients, probably one of the easier ones since we do that quite often. It's a little more intense in mass casualty incidents, but we should have a pretty good handle on that. So specific details regarding communication with all the entities that I just went over will be discussed later in this video. So EMS World states that when mass casualty incidents have been reviewed by different organizations, different papers, FEMA reviews them every once in a while in their yearly report, the number one problem that they found was communication. This may be in part to the lack of sufficient training that agencies in emergency medical fields give for mass casualty incidents. So the EMS Preparedness for Disaster and Mass Casualty Incident Response Survey that FEMA put out found that 86% of EMS providers receive training only once a year or not at all in mass casualty incidents. Regardless of the cause, communication is an issue in mass casualty incidents. The information being communicated, the person that is communicating the information, and how the information is being communicated play a huge role in whether the communication is effective overall. So one of the most common pitfalls in communication is between EMS medical providers, so people on the ground in the field like EMTs and paramedics, and hospitals. So our communication with the hospital during MCIs is has the most chance for pitfalls. That's going to be discussed later as well. So before I discuss the different entities that are involved and how to communicate with them each individually during an MCI, there are a couple important components in the command system that should be known when you're communicating during mass casualty incidents. So I'm going to review several command structures that are typically employed during mass casualty incidents. These are the Incident Command System and the National Incident Management System. And I'm going to see how EMS professionals like us can communicate with them. Following that review, I'm going to explain important components of communicating with the specific groups, as I discussed, and the unique communication problems that can arise between those groups. So FEMA describes the National Incident Management System, or NIMS, as a template for management of incidents regardless of the size of the scope. It acts as more of an overarching guideline for disaster and MCI response. The Incident Command System, or ICS, is a component of NIMS, and we should all be familiar with that. I think all of us have to have training on that at some point in order to be licensed, or at least employed in an agency. The ICS establishes a way to control personnel, facilities, equipment, and communications during a mass casualty incident. An incident commander is established at any mass casualty incident, any disaster. They're going to be responsible for coordinating the entire operation and assigning duties to any professionals that are on scene, which is us. This is most likely who you as an EMS professional will communicate with, either directly or indirectly, when you arrive on the scene if you were not already there. The Public Information Officer is also another important individual in mass casualty incidents. They're responsible for dealing with the media, so any media questions should be directed to them. Unless you've been authorized to release information regarding the mass casualty incident, which is unlikely, you should typically not be answering questions from the media. You probably also won't have time because you should be focused on patient care and not the media. You likely don't have all the information regarding the mass casualty incident, and miscommunicating information that is incorrect or sometimes even correct can cause panic or escalation of the situation depending on what type of situation it is. As always, rely on your agency's policies regarding communication with the media, and when in doubt, send the media to the Public Information Officer. So the remainder of the ICS is organized into 4 sections with focus on carrying out specific tasks during the mass casualty incident response. We're a part of that process. Another important note that is specifically for us in the Incident Command System is that we're often the first to arrive at a mass casualty incident. So, along with law enforcement, obviously, they're also typically there, one of the first. There are 4 key points regarding communication that we need to know if we arrive on scene first. So the first is scene safety. Everyone that is responding or is going to respond needs to know the safety of the scene. Law enforcement is going to help obviously figure that out, but you need to be able to communicate that to whoever, to your agency, to law enforcement. Whoever arrives first needs to know that information. Second is you have to actually activate the incident command system if it's not already activated, and your agency should have protocols to do that. And the third is you need to communicate what is happening and what resources are needed. So different mass casualty incidents are going to need vastly different personnel and equipment. And finally, you need to be able to communicate with your team what you need to do at the moment. Designate a leader on scene. They're probably going to remain leader until the incident commander arrives. And as EMTs, the first thing you should probably be doing, EMTs or paramedics, any medical professional, the first thing you're probably going to be doing is triaging patients. Okay, so now that we understand the organizational systems that function in mass casualty incidents, we can talk about the specific groups that we will run into as EMS professionals and how to communicate with them. So communicating with patients is something that we all should be fairly familiar with. Every day at work, we're engaging with our patients and supporting them through their emergency. Patient communication is very critical during mass casualty incidents. Depending on the scale of the scene, or even if it's a smaller scene, activity may seem chaotic and uncoordinated to patients because they have no idea what's going on. They're not on the radio. They don't know anything that's happening. So during triage, they may not understand why there are other people being treated before them. So say, for example, you have a patient who has an open fracture on their lower leg. It's not bleeding profusely, but it's going to be painful and it's going to be disconcerting to the patient, and it's probably going to be considerably painful. But it's not immediately life-threatening, and initially medics are going to focus on critical patients that whose injuries are going to kill them if they're not dealt with. And so you, as a provider, need to be able to explain to patients, even that if you're not taking care of them, that you have to take care of critically injured patients first, and that someone will take care of them soon, that they're not going to get left behind, that the process is that critically injured patients are first, and then people with secondary injuries or less critical injuries are going to be taken care of after them. Patients may also have numerous family members or friends that are unaccounted for. This heightens distress in patients that are already physically injured. Controlling the scene for mass casualty incidents is of critical importance, and reassuring patients and managing their emotional shock can help control that scene. Just reassure the patient. It's going to help them through their physical injury, and it's going to make the scene slightly less chaotic. Be honest about how much you know about the mass casualty incident, and focus on helping them help themselves through their injury. Have them focus on themselves and getting them through whatever is ailing them at that time. Communication with professionals on scene is another important aspect of mass casualty incidents. There are numerous organizations that work together during one of these incidents. The most important piece of information to figure out as a provider is who's in charge and what your position in the chain is. The incident commander will give you your assignment, and you'll be expected to perform that assignment until they either tell you to go home or they give you another assignment. And once you know your role, you'll be expected to communicate changes in the scene, as well as patient care updates to your teammates and your command. So we should be familiar with communicating with law enforcement and medical providers, such as EMTs, paramedics, sometimes nurses and doctors are out on the ambulances with us. Depending on the scene, other specialized entities may be deployed. Military, hazmat, and advanced resources, or advanced rescue, not resources. Task forces may respond to the mass casualty incident, depending on its type. Their assignments may take precedent over yours. Military might need to secure the area, or hazmat might need to decontaminate the area before you can begin patient care. So make sure that both parties understand what their jobs are, who goes in first, if you go in at the same time, so that no toes get stepped on and everyone stays safe. Follow your orders given to you by your agency and instant command, and just be prepared to work alongside specialized task forces, and that their assignment may take precedent over yours in the beginning. Communication between EMS providers and hospitals have the most opportunity for errors during mass casualty incidents. Hospitals can be easily overwhelmed if medical professionals on scene, which is us, don't communicate the correct information at the correct time. So there are 3 key pieces of information that have to be exchanged between us and hospitals during a mass casualty incident. So that's the number of patients, the type of injuries that the patient has, which is part of an accurate HERE report, and resources that are available in the hospital. So this can be difficult if the exact number of patients isn't known initially in a mass casualty incident, but this number has to be updated as soon as possible as it becomes available. Hospitals only have so many beds. They only have so many specialized surgeons, and that hospital might not have what that patient needs. So on scene, we have to have an open line of communication with hospitals, detailing changes in the number of injuries and the type of injuries. We have to ensure that hospitals have enough resources to manage and house the patients that we're discharging to them. We can't just drop patients off when they have no chance of being treated there. It might be necessary to designate a communicator or a small group who communicates directly with the hospitals as broad demands change. So this will prevent duplicate reporting of overall gross number of patients, as well as preventing the overwhelming of radio frequencies. Communication with the public and the media can be difficult during mass casualty incidents. Emotions run high in patients, onlookers, and responders during these situations. It's likely that you as a EMS professional will be approached, most likely after the scene, probably not during, because you're going to be focused on patient care. You're not going to have time. It's going to be too chaotic. As mentioned before, the public information officer is responsible for most of the media communication. They'll know the most up-to-date information, and a lot of times they have areas for people to congregate for questions. If protocol allows you to respond to questions or concern, there are several key points to keep in mind. Don't say anything that you're not sure about. Don't guess. If you don't know, be honest about that. Keep HIPAA in mind. You shouldn't be saying anything specific about any patients, anything like that. Keep in mind that you're probably not going to be able to comment until the incident is over, because you're going to be tending to patients, or the incident details aren't going to be known. But most likely you'll be too busy taking care of your patients to be bothered with media questions. So before I leave, just one last point. I want to overview some important aspects of radio communication during MCIs for EMS providers. Number one, golden rule is to be clear and specific. Don't ramble. A lot of times in these tense situations, very emotional, you tend to want to ramble on the radio, but don't collect your thoughts, give an accurate report. Don't overwhelm the radio with useless information, with needless information. There's going to be so many people on the radios that you want to be in and out with the most accurate, concise information that you can. Don't use complicated terms. If your agency has different acronyms or code words for certain things that aren't nationally recognized, don't use those. Use terms that everyone's going to understand, because you're going to have more than just your agency online. Mass casualty incidents are difficult for everyone involved, but we have an opportunity as EMS professionals to control the scene and to create the best outcome for everyone, including ourselves. With effective communication, these incidents can turn from a chaotic nightmare into a well-organized nightmare. All right, so that's my presentation. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your term.